A 7-ton meteor shooting across the sky. The sonic boom heard over multiple states. The meteor 6 feet in diameter, the ground shaking.
A 7-ton rock exploded over Lake Erie in broad daylight. 4 days later, another one broke apart over Houston. And a Harvard astrophysicist just published a paper asking whether 3I Atlas, an interstellar object from another star system, could be sending debris into Earth's atmosphere right now. And if you have been following 3I Atlas, you already know that, right? Around the same time these fireballs started making headlines, an interstellar object from another star system was making its closest pass through our solar system.
Fireball that shot through the sky and shook Northeast Ohio this morning.
That is not a coincidence that serious scientists are willing to ignore. Could 3I Atlas be connected to the surge in meteor fireballs over the United States? If you want the straight answer, where NASA agrees and where the door is still wide open, this video breaks it all down clearly and honestly. Subscribe to Space Aquarius and let's begin. In the first quarter of 2026, something unusual showed up in the fireball data. The American Meteor Society tracks bright meteor events across the country. People report what they see, a flash, a streak, a boom, and the society logs it, maps it, and analyzes it.
People heard the booms and the shakings and everything. It was from this big space rock exploding above Medina County.
What they found in early 2026 was striking. The average number of witnesses per fireball event went through the roof. In March 2026 alone, the average witness count per fireball event was 142 people. To put that in perspective, the next highest March on record was 49 witnesses per event, back in 2021. That means March 2026 was nearly 3 times more witness than any previous March in the dataset. And it was not just the witness counts. Almost half of all March 2026 fireball events were each seen by more than 50 people. Now, 2 specific events stood out above the rest. On March 17, 2026, at about 9 in the morning Eastern Time, a fireball exploded over Lake Erie. Witnesses reported it from Ohio all the way into Pennsylvania. The object that caused it was estimated at about 7 tons, roughly the weight of a large pickup truck, and it produced an airburst equivalent to about 250 tons of TNT. That is not a small event. Then on March 21, 2026, another fireball broke apart above the Houston metro area in Texas. That one weighed roughly 1 ton and produced an airburst equivalent to about 26 tons of TNT. Loud enough to shake houses, bright enough to be seen in broad daylight. So the question on the table is simple. Is this normal? Or is something driving an unusual increase in fireball activity? And that is where 3I Atlas enters the conversation. Avi Loeb published a paper in late March 2026, laying out the math on whether 3I Atlas could be responsible. Back in August 2025, a space observatory called SphereX detected a plume of carbon dioxide gas extending at least 215,000 miles out from the nucleus of 3I Atlas. That is a massive gas cloud. And where there is gas, there may also be solid fragments, small pieces of material shed from the surface of the object as it heats up and vents. Loeb asked, could any of those fragments have traveled far enough to reach Earth? He ran the numbers. In the second half of March 2026, Earth arrived at its closest point to the path of 3I Atlas through our solar system, about 34 million miles from the object's trajectory. That is the key number. For a fragment to cross 34 million miles in the roughly 7 months since the gas plume was detected in August 2025, it would need to have been ejected from 3I Atlas at a speed of about 2 miles per second. That is only about 5% of 3I Atlas's own speed through the solar system. Entirely plausible for material shed from a comet-like object. But Loeb went further. He also considered fragments that may have been shed from 3I Atlas much earlier. Not 7 months ago, but 10 years ago, when the object was still far out in the solar system. At that distance, a fragment would only need to have been ejected at about 600 feet per second to eventually reach Earth's path. That is comparable to the speed of gas molecules surrounding the object. In other words, fragments shed naturally from 3I Atlas years ago could, in theory, have drifted into Earth's path by now. So how many fragments are we talking about? Loeb estimated the total mass of 3I Atlas at roughly 1 billion metric tons, based on the non-gravitational acceleration the object has shown, meaning it is being pushed slightly off a purely gravitational path, likely by outgassing. He then assumed that about 10% of that mass could have broken into small fragments, each about the size of a marble, roughly half an inch across and weighing about 10 grams, or about a third of an ounce. That gives you roughly 10 trillion fragments total. Now, most of those fragments would scatter in all directions. Only a tiny fraction would ever cross Earth's path. Loeb calculated the maximum number of those fragments that could intercept Earth by dividing the cross-sectional area of our planet by the surface area of a sphere with a radius of 34 million miles. The result? A maximum of about 34,000 fragments could potentially burn up in Earth's atmosphere and appear as meteor fireballs. And even in a more conservative scenario, assuming only 1% of 3I Atlas's mass broke into fragments, and assuming those fragments traveled a distance similar to the Earth-Sun separation, Loeb still calculated about 30 extra fireballs from meteoroids roughly 2 inches in diameter. So the math does not rule it out. But here's where Loeb draws a very important line. The two biggest fireball events, the 7-ton object over Ohio and the 1-ton object over Texas, are too large to be connected to 3I Atlas. He is direct about this. There is simply not enough mass available in 3I Atlas to produce fragments that large in sufficient numbers to intercept Earth. The biggest objects that could plausibly be linked to 3I Atlas would be small, marble-sized, maybe up to a couple of inches across. Not 7-ton boulders. So what caused those two major events? That brings us to the other side of this story. NASA weighed in on the fireball surge in late March 2026, and their explanation was straightforward. We are in fireball season. In the Northern Hemisphere, the period from February through April sees a natural increase in bright meteor events. The appearance rate of fireballs can go up by as much as 10 to 30% during this window, especially around the weeks of the March equinox. Scientists are not entirely sure why. Some think Earth passes through more large debris during this part of its orbit. Others point to atmospheric and observational factors. NASA also pointed to something else: more cameras, smartphones, doorbell cameras, dashboard cameras, security systems. More people are capturing these events than ever before. And when more people capture them, more people report them. And when more people report them, the witness counts go up, even if the actual number of fireballs has not changed dramatically. That is a real and important point. The 142 average witnesses per event in March 2026 may partly reflect how many more cameras are pointed at the sky today compared with 5 years ago. So where does that leave us? Here's the honest answer. The two explanations are not mutually exclusive. NASA is almost certainly right that fireball season and better camera coverage explain a large portion of what people saw in early 2026. But Loeb's math shows that a small contribution from 3I Atlas fragments, tiny marble-sized pieces shed from the object months or years ago, cannot be ruled out. The way to test it is through directional and velocity analysis. If any of the smaller fireball events in early 2026 came from the same direction as 3I Atlas's path through the solar system, and if their speeds are consistent with material ejected from that object, that would be meaningful evidence of a connection. That analysis has not been completed yet. And that is the open question sitting at the center of this story. We know the fireballs happened. We know 3I Atlas was at its closest point to Earth's orbital path in late March 2026. We know the math allows for a small number of 3I Atlas fragments to have reached Earth. We know the two biggest events were almost certainly not connected to 3I Atlas. And we know that fireball season combined with more cameras explains most of what people saw. But most is not all. And until someone completes the directional and velocity analysis on the smaller events, the door stays open. That is what makes this story worth paying attention to. Not because 3I Atlas is raining boulders on American cities. It is not. But because for the first time in recorded history, an interstellar object passed close enough to Earth's orbital path that scientists had to sit down and do the math on whether its debris could reach us. And the answer came back. Maybe for the small stuff. That is a new kind of question, and it is one we are going to be asking more often as better telescopes find more interstellar visitors passing through our solar system. 3i Atlas opened that door and is not closing anytime soon. If this video got you thinking, subscribe to Space Aquarius so you do not miss what comes next as the analysis continues. Leave a comment and tell me what you think. Fireball season and better cameras or something more? And share this with someone who saw one of those fireballs and wants to know what was really going on.